Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are about to begin our 2036 trip through the playoffs. Marks the ninth consecutive trip to the playoffs for our expansion Buffalo Wings organization in 11 years in the majors. And we've won the NL East for a fourth consecutive year this season. So from those perspectives, it has been a pretty successful playthrough. That said, we've only made one trip to the World Series. We did fortunately win it all 2 years ago in the 2034 season, but one World Series title is not quite what we're looking for, and we're hoping that this may be the year where we finally get a second title. As I mentioned, we did end up winning the National League East this year with a 94-68 record. It was a very weird situation where all four of the wild card teams in the National League came from the NL East. Only the Rockies, who tied with us for the best record in the National League and would have home field advantage over us by virtue of taking the season series 2-1, will make the playoffs from the NL West. We did get a very small break. We'll be playing the Mets, as you can see in the upcoming NLDS. They were actually the sixth seed, so the lowest seed among the six playoff teams in the National League. That said, with their 85 wins, they were only 3 wins worse on the season than the third and fourth seeded Phillies and Braves. So although they are the lowest seed in the National League, their season was not materially different from the Braves, the Phillies, or the Marlins. All four of those teams were separated by 3 games in the NL East. We've talked about this a lot in previous episodes, but this could be our last run with either Shamar Jenneret, who we picked up as a free agent 3 years ago, and all he's done is lead the National League in ribbies 3 consecutive years, was a World Series MVP 2 years ago, and was the National League MVP last season. And it could be our last go-round with Jenneret if he decides to opt out of his contract after this regular season is over. Otherwise, it very well could be our last go-round with Deshaun Seifu, a former number 1 overall pick of ours, who has led the league in stolen bases 9 consecutive years, won his first batting title a year ago, and he's also been a regular leader of the National League in at-bats, runs, hits, doubles, and triples, coming off one of the best seasons in his career, and he is headed to free agency this upcoming off season. And you can see we've got no money available for extensions. So if Jenneret does not opt out, the only practical way for us to bring Seifu back would be to slash our scouting and development budgets materially and likely trade away a few players. So this could be our best and last chance to win a title with this crew, given that it will take a lot of creativity and luck for both Jenneret and Seifu to be back with us next year. So hopefully we can get things done properly with them this season in the postseason and win a second World Series championship with those 2 players. We've figured out what our 26-man postseason roster is going to be. As we typically do, we cut it down to 12 pitchers. Barajas, Shazier, Estrada, and Carrillo will be the 4 starters for us. Isidro Ochoa, our number 5 starter, moves to the bullpen in long relief role. Hayden Yinger also there. Yohane Varejo and Mike Waters are going to be our middle relievers. The lefty Juan Veliz and the righty Elvin Jimenez, who we traded for before the trade deadline, setup men. Lauren Walborn back as our stopper, and Pat Mems, who we picked up in the off-season, is going to be our closer. So what that means is a few pretty good players did not make the pitching staff. Harleen Susanna, longtime starter and now a long reliever for us, who had a really nice year with a 2.76 ERA. Matthew Wenzel, lefty, who had a 3.86 ERA for us this year. And then Cameron Johnson, another lefty who we picked up in a trade with the Yankees before the trade deadline. Don't make the roster. Could be a little risky to only be going with the two lefties out of the pen and the one lefty in the rotation. But I'm not necessarily counting on our AI manager to make as many and as effective pitching changes as I'd hope that I would make over the course of a playoff series. You may remember that we moved the game from GM and manager back to the GM only that I prefer before this season started in this past off season. So in previous years, the last couple seasons in particular, it's taken me about as long to play one game out and simulate that game every pitch as it'll probably take me to go through the entire postseason this year. So we will get much more near-term satisfaction from the fact that I won't be playing out all the games and I won't be managing them myself. I do hope, though, that not having a third lefty out of the pen, or perhaps even a fourth lefty out of the pen, hope that that doesn't come back to haunt us. With the fact that we did go down to 12 pitchers, that allows us to have 14 position players. And what that meant is that Joe Gallagher, the top prospect in our system, the number 9 prospect in baseball, who slammed 59 homers and 123 ribbies at Albany this year, is going to be on the postseason roster for us. Hit 283 with 5 homers and 12 ribbies and 53 at-bats. Also hit 4 doubles, walked 9 times. So a 167 WRC plus. Does not bring much to the table defensively, and he brings almost perfectly nothing to the table in terms of his abilities on the base paths or as a bunter, but still think that that bat could help us. So despite his fielding weaknesses and his lack of base running, we are going to put him in left field against left-handed pitchers and see if maybe he can hit a few homers for us this offseason. The only other real change that we made was the excellent defensive catcher Andres Medina, who also happens to be on a hot streak. We're going to be starting him against both righties and lefties now, and Walt Miller will move to a backup catcher role for us. And with that, it's time to take on the Mets in the NLDS. And we should be favorites here in the NLDS against the Mets. As we talked about, we were first in the National League East. They were 9 games behind us, but 5th overall, even though they made the playoffs. We were 9-4 against the Mets this year, so pretty dominant against them. We had the second most runs scored in the National League, while they were 11th. They do have a good pitching staff, ranked 4th in the National League in runs against, but we were also better than that with our 618 runs against, number 1 in the National League once again this year. We will have our ace Alexis Barajas back on the mound for Game 1. He was 17-7 this year with a league best 2.39 earned run average and a 6.6 WAR, which was one of the top figures in the league. Going up against Luis Serna, 32-year-old right-hander who was 6-11 with a 4.89 ERA for the Mets. Gave up a sickly 25 home runs in 151 innings pitched. Doesn't have great movement on his pitches, has extreme fly ball tendencies, and doesn't throw incredibly hard. So our hope is that even though our park here in Buffalo is not particularly a big home run park, hopefully we'll be able to score some runs against him and get a couple out of the ballpark. Certainly would hope to get off to a 1-0 start in the series with our ace on the mound. And we do get a 4-2 win. Looks like Barajas outpitched Cerna. Mems came on for the save. We didn't actually hit any home runs. It looks like 2 solo homers accounted for all of the Mets runs, but we jumped ahead with 2 in the first. They came back with a run in the second, and then we added runs in the third and the fourth innings. Looks like the young shortstop Steve Anderson was 3 for 4 for us with a ribby. Also got a couple of hits and a run scored in a ribby from Juan Estrada, a double from Seifu, and a triple from Estrada, although we didn't have any extra base hits. Barajas allowed 3 hits and 1 walk while striking out 7 over 5 1/3. And then Juan Veliz, Lorne Walborn, and Pat Mems did the job out of the bullpen, although Walborn, who's had a bit of a down year compared to his previous seasons, did give up a solo home run to account for the second run that the Mets scored. But not surprisingly, Barajas is the pitcher of the game in Game 1 and will now be taking a 1-0 lead into Game 2. Sincere Shazier, who was 13-11 with a 3.91 ERA for us this year, the 26-year-old on the mound for us, up against Chris Green of the Mets, 32-year-old who was 9-11 with a 4.26 ERA this year. Throws pretty hard, though. Over the course of Chris Green's career, he's been a bit above average in terms of his FIP minus. Did lead the American League a few years ago with a 2.62 ERA. I mean, quite honestly, looking at his ratings, I'm surprised he's only basically slightly above average pitcher over the course of his career. But he's durable. He's got decent stamina. And he's been an effective pitcher for years. That said, we are at home, and I still think the pitching matchup favors us, so certainly hope that we can take a 2-0 lead to Citi Field. And unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. 8-7 loss. Looks like Elvin Jimenez took the loss for us. We did finally get a homer from the always controversial James Wood. And we had a 4-0 lead before they scored 3 in the 6th, and then it ended up going into extra innings. They actually took a 7-6 lead on us in the 4-run 8th inning. So disappointing performance from our bullpen. We came back with a run in the bottom of the 9th to send it into extra innings, but a run-scoring double by Mauricio in the top of the 12th helped send the Mets to the victory. We got 3 hits from Seifu, a couple from Estrada, a couple from Jenneret, and 3 from James Wood. They got big game from Mauricio, including that game-winning double, and then Carlos Verdecchia looks like he may have had a really big hit. 4 for 6 with 4 ribbies, including a 2-run home run in the big 8th inning that the Mets had. So Shazier was okay. He scattered 9 hits over 5 2/3 innings, just allowed the 3 runs. Veliz picked up an out. Walborn was not great, and then Pat Mems, the closer, was the guy who really struggled for us. 5 hits and 3 earned runs over 2 2/3. Jimenez ended up earning the loss, and then Varejo got the final out of the game for us. Mike Heiner set a Buffalo playoff game record with 4 walks today. Unfortunately for us, only one of those walks was converted into a run scored. And we'll be heading to New York with a 1-1 tie in this series. So we're going to need to win at least one game in Citi Field. And as we get ready for game number 3 in New York New York, we will have Juan Estrada, the left-hander, on the mound. 12-10 with a 3.86 ERA for us this year, season after he led the National League in ERA. Going up against Mejia Negrete, 33-year-old who was 17-7, 3.23 ERA for the Mets, and league best 1.7 walks per 9 innings. Excellent control. He can give up home runs, though. Only gave up 14 this year, but with average movement and fly ball tendencies, maybe we can go yard on him once or twice here in Citi Field as we try to ensure that we can get back to the National League Championship Series. And we do get a 5-1 win today. Looks like Estrada outpitched Negrete. Walborn, the stopper with the save. Tim Hull and Shamar Jenneret, both with their first homers of the playoffs. We scored early and often, runs in the second, third, fourth, and fifth innings to take a 5-0 lead. They came back with one in the eighth, but a big-time performance. We held the Mets to just 6 hits, although we only had 7, but we had some extra base hits with doubles from Hull and Gallagher, and then home runs, as we talked about, from Jenneret and Hull. So Estrada, just 3 hits while striking out 8 over 7 innings. Mike Waters did give up a run in relief. He's the youngster who ended up making our playoff roster over those 3 pitchers that I had talked about earlier at the start of the episode. Waters hit a 2.67 ERA with almost a strikeout per inning for us in his rookie season in the majors. So we felt like he was a good choice to go with, although he didn't do great for us today. Walborn did come on and got the final inning in 2/3 pitched while striking out 4 to earn the save for us. And now we've got an opportunity to hopefully not even have to play another game in Buffalo in this series. We'll move forward to game number 4. And again, at least we've guaranteed that we're going home for a game 5 if necessary. But the goal at this point is to hopefully win today so that back up against the wall game is not necessary. We will have Jorge Carrillo on the mound, 17-6 with a 3.94 ERA. International free agent signing from us over a decade ago, is going to be a free agent after this season. Another guy who we'd probably like to bring back, but whether we'll be able to afford it or not depends on whether Jenneret opts out and how much we're willing to spend on Seifu. So Carrillo could be pitching some of his final games in a Buffalo uniform. He's going up today against Jeremy Totenhausen, 31-year-old, was 5-8 this year for the Mets with a pretty solid 3.38 ERA. That said, his Sierra and his WAR were nothing special. Looks like a respectable major league pitcher, but certainly would think that we would be a small favorite in this pitching matchup. And we do get the victory. Looks like Mems, the closer, got the win in relief, and then Jimenez with a save. I'm guessing maybe this one went into extra innings, and then we hit a big hit in extra innings. Another homer from James Wood and Deshaun Seifu with a rare postseason home run. Taking a look at the box score, yep, it did go into extra innings. The Mets actually were up on us 3-0, and then they were up 4-1. We came back to tie it in the 7th at 4, and then in the 11th inning, a 3-run home run from Deshaun Seifu. So he does not hit many home runs, but that was certainly a big one. 2 for 6 with 3 homers on the day for Seifu. Steve Anderson and James Wood also with a couple hits each. And Carrillo was really not that good. Allowed 6 hits and a walk, while 4 earned runs over 4 innings. Vallejo, Mems, and Jimenez, though, then combined for 7 innings of scoreless relief, allowing just 5 hits and 1 walk. So the big bullpen came through for us, and we ended up getting into the Mets bullpen ultimately, including scoring some runs off of Emerson Talavera. I feel like he was on our team at one point, or maybe I just looked at him as a free agent at one point. No, he was with us for several years. I was like, I know that name. It all kind of blends together. It's been a few years since he was with us, but he was a important arm out of our bullpen for a few years, and unfortunately for Emerson, we got the best of him today. So our Buffalo Wings, James Wood, the player of the game for us. That's a bit surprising. 2 for 4 with 2 ribbies is a big day, but when there's a guy who's 2 for 6 with 3 ribbies, including a series-clinching home run. I guess it wasn't officially a series-clinching home run because we needed to get 3 outs after he hit it, but I would have thought that Seifu would have gotten the player of the game. But regardless, we are on to the National League Championship Series, and fortunately for us, it looks like the Braves knocked off the Rockies 3-0. So although we will be facing a familiar division foe in the NLCS, we will have home field advantage, and it won't be against the Rockies, who knocked us out a year ago. Both of this series in the American League are 2-2 at this point. And as we get ready for the National League Championship Series, where, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, we've only been successful once, despite many trips there over the years. The Las Vegas Athletics upended the team with the best record in baseball, the Seattle Mariners, and they've got a 1-0 lead over the AL East champion Nashville Stars. And as I mentioned, our NL East winning Buffalo Wings will be taking on the Atlanta Braves, who are one of the teams that was chasing us this year. 88-74 record. They finished tied with Philadelphia, 6 games behind us on the season. Taking a look at the matchup here, it was a pretty tight season series. We did take it 7-6, but it was a pretty even matchup between us and the Braves. As we've talked about, we were second in the NL in runs scored, first in runs against. They were fourth in runs scored, but 12th in runs against. So although both teams have pretty good offenses, our hope is that our superior pitching staff will lead us to victory here in the NLDS. And after I paused things, I realized I may have just called the NLDS the NLCS the NLDS. So this is the National League Championship Series, if I did call it by the wrong name. Or perhaps I'm just confusing you because I didn't actually call it that. Our ace, Alexis Barajas, back on the mound for Game 1, going against Jonathan Chapman, a 23-year-old, a very good-looking young pitcher. Was 10-4 this year with 27 saves, 3.69 ERA, well over a strikeout per inning for the Atlanta Braves. So 23-year-old who was picked up in a trade with Miami. Wonder where he was drafted, because he looks like he would have been a pretty solid prospect. Second rounder, 49th overall back in 2031. So it looks like he has developed pretty well. A ground ball pitcher, throws in the high 90s, has a devastating changeup in addition to an excellent fastball and a good cutter. So this could be a pretty tough matchup for us and a good pitcher's duel. We obviously going to feel confident when Barajas is on the mound, but certainly looks like an interesting matchup for us here today. And didn't end up being as close as we would have thought. A 10-0 victory for the Buffalo Wings. 4 home runs for the Wings. Joe Edwards, James Wood, who's having a big playoffs for us, the catcher Andres Medina, and the young shortstop Steve Anderson. We scored 2 in the second, 2 in the fourth, 1 in the fifth, and then really busted things open with 5 runs in the seventh, including a 3-run shot from Funky Cold Medina, a couple hits from Heiner, 3 hits from Anderson, and then a couple each from Wooden Medina. And Edwards also drove in a couple of runs with the home run that he hit. Barajas was really good, 5 hits and 8 strikeouts over 6 2/3. Waters and Ochoa with scoreless relief over the final 2 1/3 innings. Looks like their second baseman, Ryan Ritter, was injured, just a mild hammy strain, but still going to impact him for 2 weeks. He's a nice defensive second baseman, but that bat for a major leaguer is brutal. Somehow did hit 278 this year and 72 at-bats, but spent most of the year in AAA at 35 years old. I'm guessing there may have been some injury issues with whoever Atlanta's regular second baseman was, and now Ritter is banged up. So a good start to the series for Buffalo against a pitcher that we thought would be pretty tough. Unlike the series against the Mets in the NLDS, our hope is that we'll get a win at home with Sincere Shazier on the mound in Game 2. He is going up against Luis Larrea, a 26-year-old who has some incredible stuff. Another guy with a brilliant changeup and an excellent slider, a 5-pitch arsenal. Doesn't always know where the ball is going, and he can give up some home runs, 95 walks, and 28 home runs allowed this year. But he also struck out 13.7 per 9 innings the second straight year, where he led the National League in strikeouts per 9 innings. So should be another good pitching matchup. Let's hope that we can either draw some walks and or hit some home runs off of Mr. Larrea. And we do get a 4-3 win. Wood with another home run, and Bobby Bolig with a couple of home runs. I think those are his first 2 of the playoffs. Our old friend Ali Ostendorf looks like he lost his spot in the rotation, unless perhaps the other pitcher was only used as an opener or something. But looks like Ostendorf may have been their 5th starter and is now a reliever in the playoffs. But Atlanta jumped out to a 3-0 lead. We came back with 2 in the 5th, and then we tied it up in the bottom of the 9th. Solo home run from James Wood. And then in the bottom of the 10th, Bobby Bolig sent the fans home happy as Buffalo wins 4-3. So Bolig and Wood, clearly the heroes of this game. Shazier was okay. 7 hits, 2 walks, 3 earned runs over 5 1/3. A somewhat similar performance to what he gave for us in Game 2 of the series against the Mets. But fortunately, we get the W this time around. Veliz, Walborn, Jimenez, and Mems combined for scoreless relief. Ostendorf, as we talked about, blew the save and then took the loss, gave up 2 hits, and they were both home runs, the ones that we talked about, to Wood and Bolig. So we are in good shape, up 2-0 as we head to Atlanta here in the NLCS. Game 3 coming up. Nashville is up on the A's 2-1 at this point. We've got the lefty Juan Estrada back on the mound. He will be going up against Amari Mohead, 28-year-old, 13-12 with a 3.88 ERA for the Braves. Another guy who looks like a good, solid major league pitcher. He's got a 5-pitch arsenal of very good pitches. Doesn't look quite as intimidating in terms of his stuff as the first 2 pitchers we faced in the series from the Braves, but certainly not going to be someone who's going to be easy to score runs off. So hopefully we'll get a good performance from Mr. Estrada. And we do a 4-0 win. So the second shutout of this series for Buffalo. We've allowed just 3 runs through the first 3 games. Strada gets the W. Mems with a save. Got a home run from Steve Anderson. Was a scoreless game until the 7th, and then we scored 2 in the 7th and 2 in the 8th. 2-run homer from Anderson in the 7th. 2-run single from Heiner in the top of the 8th inning. Only hit 6 hits, but fortunately for us, we only allowed 5. Jenneret, who was 2 for 4 with a run scored, the only player on our team with 2 hits today. Seifu got a stolen base for us. Nice performance from Estrada. Walborn gets the hold, and then Jimenez came on, gave up 2 hits without recording an out before Mems had to come on to clean up his mess in the top of the 9th, and or in the bottom of the 9th, actually, since we are now on the road. So Estrada, the player of the game, he pretty much every season except last season has been a very effective playoff performer for us. Good to see him back and performing good in the playoffs for us once again. And now we head to Game 4, and the hope is a sweep. The Stars are up 3-1 on the A's, so they could clinch today as well. So our goal is to hopefully clinch today, get another series where we don't need any of our starters to go twice, and be heading into the playoffs, the potential World Series, with our starters well rested and ready to go. Carrillo on the mound for us. He was not good in the Game 4 win against the Mets, going up against Ricky Foss, 9-9 with a 4.23 ERA. Did strike out almost a batter per inning, but looking at the another guy with a great changeup. So a lot of guys in the Braves organization apparently have learned to throw excellent changeups. But that said, he doesn't have, other than the changeup, quite the quality or the amount of pitches as most of the other starters that we've faced. Also not the greatest control in the world. Hopefully we can get by Foss, the left-handed pitcher, and move on to a second appearance in the World Series for these Buffalo Wings. And it's still possible, but it's not going to happen today. We don't get the sweep. Ritter with a home run, the second baseman that I talked about earlier, who I didn't think was all that good a hitter, did hit a dinger off of us. We got one from Hull, but Carrillo took the loss. Milbrandt got the win in relief. I'm guessing something happened in the late innings here. Actually, not really. The Braves, 7 runs in the second inning. And then we kind of clawed our way back to 7-5 by the 6th inning. Can see these AI-generated articles, not always completely accurate. I mean, Ritter was 1 for 3 with 3 ribbies and a walk. But they say that he was unstoppable. I don't know, 1 for 3? Not really my idea of unstoppable. But they did get the victory. Seifu and Gaglia each had 2 hits for us. But that 7-run second inning crushed our hopes early. Brutal performance from Carrillo, 6 hits and 3 walks over an inning and 2/3. Didn't allow another run after that, with Waters, Yinger, Walborn, and Valise working out of the pen. They also ended up using 4 relievers, so I guess our only positive thing is that although our bullpen will probably be relatively tired for Game 5 tomorrow, so will the Braves bullpen. So we head now to game number 5, and it looks like the A's did win game 5 against Nashville. So they'll be going to a 6th game there. Barajas back on the mound for us against Luis Larrea. and Atlanta with another close victory. So after I was talking, we had only allowed 3 runs to Atlanta in those first 3 games, including the 2 shutouts. They've scored 7 and 6 on us at home the last couple days. We got the home runs in Game 5 with Bolig and Flores, but looks like Veliz took the loss in relief. They once again scored early with 3 runs in the first. We came back with 4 in the 7th. Traded runs, or actually they came back in the bottom of the 7th to tie it at 4. We got 1 in the top of the 8th, and then they got 2 in the bottom of the 8th on a 2-run double from Ricard off of Juan Veliz. So Barajas was okay. Varejo and Veliz were not great in relief. So after taking a 3-0 lead in the series, we're now heading back home up only 3-2. Heiner injured in a collision at a base. Back tightness, 1-day impact. Not that concerned about that. Center fielder Chuck Litt, maybe a more serious injury it appears. And relief pitcher Carson Milbrandt, sore ankle that's going to impact him for 2 days. So they could be losing Chuck Litt, who is a solid defensive center fielder for them, hit .315 this year. So the day off for us should mean that Heiner is perfectly ready to go on October 27th back in Buffalo for a Game 6. And after taking that 3-0 lead in the series, the hope was we finish it off today and don't risk putting ourselves in a situation where we could become the second team to puke up a 3-0 lead in the Major League Baseball playoffs. Sincere Shazier on the mound for us. Jonathan Chapman with his excellent changeup back on the mound for Atlanta. We won this matchup 4-3 the first time around, although neither of the starters were involved in the decision. And Atlanta has pushed us to the brink. After we took a 3-0 lead, they've now won 3 in a row. Edwards and Jenneret with homers for us. Ricard and Awai with homers for them. Our Buffalo Wings now tied 3-3 and hoping to avoid the ignominious standing of the Yankees in 2004 against the Boston Red Sox, where the Yankees puked up a 3-0 lead in a 7-game series. We are 1 game away from doing the same thing. Once again, had a 3-0 lead, so that's actually a little different. It seemed like Atlanta had been scoring early in the previous games, but I gave up 5 runs in the 5th. Vance Honeycutt, our old friend, with a 2-run double, and Tatis Jr. with a run-scoring double also in the 5th off of Shazier. I'm guessing they chased him and then got into the bullpen. Shazier, 8 hits and 5 earned runs over 4 2/3 innings. He's got a 6.32 ERA in the playoffs at this point. Walborn with a very ugly relief appearance. And the pressure is on our Buffalo Wings now after taking a 3-0 lead over Atlanta and talking about a potential sweep and talking about how good our pitching had been doing. We have given up 7, 6, and 10 runs over the past 3 games. The positive thing is we've scored 5 runs every game, so it's not like they've completely shut down our offense. But we need to get our pitching back on track. Game 3, same matchup as today, Juan Estrada against Amari Mohead. We won that one 4-0. I also talked about earlier how Estrada, other than last season, has been a very clutch player for us in previous playoffs. We'll see if he can come through here and send us to a potential World Series berth against the Las Vegas A's, who also came back against the Stars. So our goal is to ensure that the Braves don't pull off a big comeback against us. 8-7. So we are on to the World Series. Mems with the win in relief. Our old friend Ali Ostendorf takes his second loss of the series in relief. Ton of home runs hit in this game. Tatis Jr., Ritter with his second, Iwai and Therio for the Braves. 2 home runs from James Wood. Series MVP Steve Anderson with his third of the playoffs. And Joe Gallagher, the young outfielder, hit a home run for us also. So I'm guessing this one may have went into extra innings. No, it didn't go into extra innings, but look at that. Wow. What a crazy game. And look at the way those win probabilities changed. The Braves jumped out to a 3-0 start in the first. We had it tied by the bottom of the third. We added runs in the 6th and the 7th to take a 5-3 lead into the 8th. Gave up a run to make it 5-4 in the top of the 8th. And then the Braves exploded on us with 3 runs in the top of the 9th to take a 7-5 lead. Therio with that 2-run homer. And then in the bottom of the 9th, we strike back with 3 runs of our own, including a 2-run homer off of Ostendorf by Steve Anderson. So that was playoff baseball at its best, with a lot of scores and scoring changes. Couple hits from James Wood, including the home run. 2 hits from Bobby Bolig, 3 including the big home run from Steve Anderson. Also a couple hits from Edwards and Gallagher. So just a crazy game. Estrada was not great. Vallejo, Veliz, Walborn, Jimenez, and eventually Mems all pitched. Mems gave up those 3 runs when he came on to try to get the save in the top of the 9th. And he was bailed out when we scored 3 runs in the bottom of the 9th off of old Ali Ostendorf. Our old friend Vance Honeycutt injured while throwing the ball. Take a look at what Vance did this year at the age of 33. Hit .210 with 16 homers and 18 steals for the Braves, but was a well below average offensive player with a 74 WRC plus. So doesn't seem like he is earning the $19.4 million, and he still has a lot of years left on that contract. Oof. With the season that he is coming off and the batting profile that he has now, and the fact that he's wrecked physically, he has not aged well, and that contract that the Braves signed him to about 2.5 years ago has not aged particularly well either. But after a very scary National League Championship Series, our Buffalo Wings, for the second time in franchise history, are off to the World Series. And as I mentioned, our Buffalo Wings are now getting prepared for the second World Series in franchise history. 2 years ago, 2034, we got to the World Series and we won. We are 4 wins away from a potential second championship in franchise history. Although the A's were a wild card team, they've got more wins than anyone we've faced so far this postseason. A 92-70 record. We did take the series against them 2 out of 3 this year, but they look on paper like a very good matchup, very tough matchup for us. They were second in the American League in runs scored. We were second, as we've talked about, in the National League. And they've also got a pretty good pitching staff, ranking 5th in the American League. We were the top pitching staff in the National League. So we're certainly a small favorite on paper, particularly helped by the fact that we do have home field advantage. But by no means are things guaranteed. We've got our number 4 starter, Jorge Carrillo, going here in Game 1 Mike McCrillis on the mound for the Las Vegas A's. 24-year-old, was a second-round pick in 2031. Has a pretty nice profile with an excellent fastball. 11-11 this year with a 4.25 ERA, more than a strikeout per inning for the A's. And he has one of those wonderful personalities that we like to have on our team. Actually, he's got a perfect personality. He is a high leadership, loyalty, adaptability, work ethic, and intelligence, low financial ambition, or as I prefer to refer to it, low greed, and he's got a captain personality. So he is basically a perfect influence in your clubhouse and on his teammates, and a pretty darn good pitcher as well. Our hope is that we will get the series off to a good start, but certainly looks like, as you would expect for a World Series with two 90-win teams, another really good pitching matchup here in Game 1 of the 2036 World Series. And we do get a 6-2 win to get things started. Edwards, Wood, and Bolig with home runs. So Wood has had a really nice playoffs for us thus far, hitting a lot of home runs for us. We scored a run in the bottom of the first to take a lead, but then they took a 2-1 lead into the fifth. But we got 2 in the fifth and 2 in the sixth. 2-run home runs from Wood and Edwards in those innings. And then a 6-2 victory. Couple of hits from Seifu, Jenneret, as well as Edwards and Wood, who we've already talked about. Correa with a quality start, 7 hits and 1 walk, 2 earned runs over 6 innings. And then Walborn and Belize combined for 3 innings of scoreless relief. Joe Edwards, the player of the game for us. So a good start to the World Series for our Buffalo Wings, and would expect some more tough pitching matchups, but at least we're up 1-0. We've got our ace on the mound now in Barajas. He'll be going up against Mike Tyler, 27-year-old, who was 8-6 with a 4.07 ERA this year. Doesn't have particularly impressive stuff. Another pitcher with a captain personality. Kind of weird to be facing 2 pitchers with those types of personalities back to back. Certainly with Barajas on the mound and us being at home, feel like things are lined up for us to hopefully get a W here and take a 2-0 lead. Let's see if Barajas can come through. And we do get an 8-1 victory today. Tim Hull and Arturo Flores with home runs for us. Barajas gets the win. Tyler gets the loss. We scored 2 in the first and then 5 in the third. Flores drew a walk in the third to score a run. Then Tim Hull with a 3-run home run. Flores' homer was a 2-run shot in the first. So the series is certainly off to the start that we would have hoped. Everybody except Gallagher had at least 1 hit for us today, and with the exception of Hardage with his 2 hits, exactly 1 hit for everyone in our lineup. Hardage also got a stolen base, so Barajas with a nice performance. Waters and Vallejo on in relief. Their catcher, Luis Limas, was injured, sprained finger for 2 weeks. He is a very good defensive catcher. That's going to impact his throwing a bit. So that could be a positive thing for us on the base paths, potentially. So a 2-0 lead for Buffalo as we head across the country to Las Vegas. We are 2 wins away from a potential World Series championship with our Buffalo Wings. And in Game 3, Sincere Shazier, who's had a rough go of it in the playoffs for us, going up against Yuri Perez, the 33-year-old, 13-11 with a 4.01 ERA. Fly ball pitcher with average movement on his pitches, did give up 28 homers this past year, has a really nice fastball. But the hope is that we'll be able to continue hitting some home runs off of this A's pitching staff. We've got 5 in the first 2 games of the series. Would love to add another 2 or 3 today. We did get 1 home run. Unfortunately, we are 3-2 losers as Perez outpitches Shazier. Taking a look at the box score, all the scoring was done by the 4th inning. They got single runs in the 1st, 3rd, and the 4th. We got 2 in the 4th on a 2-run homer from Shamar Jenneret. But Yuri Perez, 2 hits over 7 innings, was better than Shazier, who scattered 9 hits and a walk over 4 2/3, took the loss. Vallejo and Walborn with hitless relief. But not enough. And our series lead is down to 2-1 at this point as we head to game number 4, which will be the only start for Mr. Clutch in the playoffs, Juan Estrada. Would love to see him come through, but he is against a guy, I don't know if he's still a big-time pitcher, but Victor Lizarraga was at one point an incredible pitcher. Looks like his stuff is largely gone at this point. 14-4 with a 4.22 ERA, but you look at this, he was a Cy Young Award winner a little over a decade ago, a perennial all-star back in his days in Montreal, led the National League in innings pitched 3 times, led the league in games started once, strikeouts once, quality start percentage a couple times, and pitcher WAR a couple times. So looks like at this point he's probably not quite the same pitcher that he used to be. Still has very good movement and good control, but his stuff is certainly not overwhelming. Looks like he was a free agent signing this past off season when he finally left the Expos. So the hope is that our young left-hander, I guess he's not really a young left-hander anymore, he's 29 years old, but our left-hander Juan Estrada, the 2-way player, can outpitch the veteran Victor Lizarraga. And we do get an 8-4 win. Estrada with the W, Lizarraga with the loss, the youngster Joe Gallagher with another home run. So a 3-1 lead now for Buffalo. We scored a run in the first. They came back to take the lead with 2 in the second. But a 6-run outburst for us in the 6th inning turned things around. Run scoring double from Heiner, a ground out by Bolig to bring in a run. And then the Gallagher home run was a grand slam. So that accounted for the other 4 runs there in the top of the 6th. So the decision to have the youngster Gallagher with only 53 major league at-bats on the playoff roster turns out to have paid off for us. So good to see him coming through for us in a big position or a big opportunity. Juan Estrada now 3-0 in the playoffs. Waters was not great in relief, and Vallejo was good in relief, but scored all those runs off of Lizarraga, and we are now 1 game away. Their center fielder Joe Choate, good-looking defensive player who's also got a pretty good bat, hit .302 with a league best 47 doubles this year, 142 WRC plus. Going to be impacted by back spasms for the rest of the playoffs. And our hope is that the rest of the playoffs is only 1 more day. As fun as it would be to celebrate a World Series championship at home in Buffalo, it would be even more fun to get it right here in Game 5 and not have to potentially face the pressure of going back to Buffalo with a 3-2 lead like we did in the NLCS a year ago against Colorado, and then we lost 2 at home to them. So we'd rather just clinch things here now. Rematch of Game 1, which we won 6-2. Carrillo against McCrillis. And unfortunately, McCrillis outpitched Carrillo today, so we will be going back to Buffalo. We have a 3-2 lead, which is positive, but we haven't clinched things yet. Luna with the save. We didn't hit any home runs, obviously, because we didn't score any runs. They got everything they needed in the first on a solo homer by Griffin. Added a 2-run single by Madsen in the bottom of the fourth. We got lone hits from Estrada, Heiner, Jenneret, Bolig, Anderson, and Edwards. Bolig and Heiner's hits were doubles, but not a lot of offense. Carrillo was not great. Yinger and Walborn working out of the pen. And at least we'll have a day off before heading, or we will be heading back today, but we'll have a day off before game number 6. The only positive thing about game number 6 is that we will have our ace on the mound. And here, back at home in Game 6, we've got a rematch of Game 2 where Barajas outpitched Tyler. The hope is that Barajas, who's been fantastic through the playoffs and is our ace, will get the W over Tyler here today. And we won't have to face a winner-take-all Game 7, which we did face in the NLCS a year ago and lost. But we faced the same thing in the NLCS this season and won. So it's certainly something that we've proven we can do. But with our ace on the mound against Mike Tyler with his pretty average stuff, feel like the matchup favors us heavily today here in Game 6. And the hope is to try to clinch it all right here. And we did it. Buffalo has won it all. And we are World Series championships for the second time. World Series champions for the second time in 3 seasons. Looks like we scored those runs against their bullpen because the stopper Walborn got the W and the closer Mems got the save. And Shamar Jenneret has been with us 3 years. He's led the National League in ribbies every season. World Series MVP in 2034. Regular season MVP in 2035. And now World Series MVP here again in 2036. And as we've been talking about, there is a part of me that hopes he opts out of that contract because that could let us keep Seifu. But there's also a part of me that recognizes that when we finally spent up the crazy amount of money to bring him on board, that has really been the bat that we were missing that has now propelled us to 2 championships in 3 years. So certainly won't be upset if he opts in. Taking a look at the box score, we scored a run in the 3rd. They came back with a run in the 4th. And then 2 in the bottom of the 8th to give us the 3-1 lead. Run scoring singles from Heiner and Tim Hull. For the day, Seifu 2 for 3 with a couple of runs scored. Jenneret 0 for 2 did score a run and walk a couple of times. Taking a look at the pitching, Barajas was fine. 4 hits and 3 walks, only 1 earned run over 5. So he kept his ERA below 2 for the playoffs. And then we got 4 innings of scoreless relief without allowing a walk and only 1 hit from Valise, Walborn, and Mems. So our excellent bullpen helped close things out for us. And as I said, for the second time in 3 seasons, the second time in franchise history, the second time in this playthrough, our Buffalo Wings are the World Series champions. And Shamar Jenneret, as we talked about, was the MVP in our 2034 championship, is now our MVP in the 2035 championship. He's led the league in ribbies 4 straight years total, 3 straight years with us. And still perversely, there's a part of me that hopes he opts out so we can follow the Deshaun Seifu storyline and see exactly where his career ends up. But we will focus on those decisions in our next episode. That said, we're still going to sim ahead to the beginning of the off season to find out whether or not Jenneret is going to opt out or opt in. But a 3-1 lead or a 3-1 series victory over the Mets, the hard-fought 4-3 win over the Braves, where a 3-0 lead evaporated, and then a 4-2 win for the Buffalo Wings here over the A's, win it at home in front of the fans in Buffalo with our ace on the mound. Can't ask for much more than that. I did want to point out one more thing that I noticed and didn't talk about when looking at this box score, but Jenneret, with the 3 homers and 8 ribbies total for the playoffs, was the World Series MVP, as we talked about. But James Wood, although he ended up hitting just .286 in the playoffs, had a ridiculous 7 home runs and tied for the team lead with 10 ribbies, along with Edwards and Anderson. So I know it was a bit controversial for us to bring back James Wood after the very mediocre season he had for us a year ago, when he hit just .206 with 15 homers and 349 at-bats. He was a bit better this year, got the average up to .234 and a couple more home runs and 29 fewer at-bats. Still was only an average offensive player for us, but when we think about the way he performed in the postseason for us, 7 home runs and 10 ribbies in 49 at-bats and a 1.087 OPS, will definitely go down in Buffalo Wings history as a big-time playoff performance from Mr. Wood. And we've moved ahead to the beginning of the off-season, but before we get into these messages and find out what's going on with Mr. Jenneret, take a moment to just enjoy the World Series trophy, the second in the history of the Buffalo Wings organization. And now to the big news. Shamar Jenneret has voided his last contract year and is going to be testing free agency. We had him for 4 years potentially left, $38 million for the first 2 years, $39 million for the third and fourth years. Those 4 years were actually the 4th through 7th years of that 7-year contract that we signed him to. Not surprising in a way. We talked about, he's led the National League, or he's led the league in ribbies 4 consecutive years. He was very close to triple crowns in both 2033 and 2035 when he won MVP awards, and he's won the World Series MVP award 2 of the last 3 seasons. So it does give us a lot of optionality. He's actually looking for very similar money to what he was making from us. As I mentioned, it was 4 years with an average of $38.5 million. So he's just looking for more guaranteed money at this point, wants to stretch it out to 7 years at an average of $39.7 million. So the amount he's looking for is not insurmountable, but it will be tough for us to bring back both him and Seifu, as well as Correa, who we talked about. We've got an option year decision due on Hayden Yinger, $1.6 million, even though he's 36 years old. Probably will bring him back for our pen. We've got an option year decision for $10 million on Harleen Susana. He's been a very good pitcher for us for many years. And if we moved on from Carrillo, which we may need to financially, he could certainly move back into the rotation as a fifth starter for us. That said, 10 million seems like a pretty big figure for him, and we do potentially have Mendoza in AAA who could take Carrillo's spot in the rotation for us next year if we move on from Susana. The concern there, though, is that Mendoza's coming off of that injury. I believe it was a torn labrum that he suffered in July, so we do worry a little bit about what the young starter will look like next year. But that'll be an interesting decision. And then James Wood, Mr. 7 home runs in the postseason. We've got a team option for him for $4 million. So Jenneret has made his decision. We've got decisions to make on Yinger, Susana, and Wood. Joel Farmer, our owner, $228 million budget. That pretty much seems like that's the range of the highest we can get to. We've lost some personnel in some of our minor league teams. And the off season is officially underway. Taking a look at the finances, that $228 million for next year will be a $2 million bump from this year. The most we've ever been is $232, but you can see here we've been between $222 and $232 million in budget over the last decade, and we've had playoffs 9 of those 10 years. And we've had some years where we've made a really good amount of money. We've had some years where we've made a little money. We've had some years where we've lost money. So I kind of feel like with the issue of that small market size that we have in Buffalo, which actually started at very small and has improved a little bit, 230 million-ish is kind of the best we can get to for a budget. And right now we're the 19th biggest budget in baseball, and we're 22nd in player payroll. But with Jenneret opting out, we've now got money to spend. The big decision is to figure out exactly how to spend it. I mentioned Carrillo is going to be a big free agent for us. He's looking for $15.5 million a year over 6 years. And might as well find out exactly what Mr. Seifu is looking for right now. And he's looking for close to $27 million a year for 7 years. So we are going to have some very interesting decisions to make this off season. Clearly, if we move on from Wood, Yinger, and or Susana, that will potentially open up even more money available for us to play with. The good news right now is that we can probably get Seifu signed if we want to bring him back, even if we brought back all 3 of those players who are facing their option year. But we're going to give it a lot more thought before we start making any decisions. In our next episode, we'll do a full recap on how all of our players performed this past season, which hopefully will help inform some of those decisions that we're going to need to make. But we'll be making those decisions from a position of strength because for the second time in this playthrough and the second time in the last 3 seasons, our Buffalo Wings are the World Series champions. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.